why do I want what I've been wanting? And is that still important? Because you get to decide what good looks like for you. You get to decide what's important, and you get to decide how you get there. And so many of us are on this wheel of doing things because it's expected, doing things because it's the next step, doing things because it's easy. And to give yourself the grace to just put everything else aside. If no one else got a vote, how would you want to live your whole life? And so we're using the old ideas and the old ways we used to solve things in a new environment and wondering, why are we still spinning our wheels? So there's some fundamental mindset shift changes that need to happen. And it doesn't matter whether you're the CEO or whether, you're 5 years into your career. And one of the biggest changes from a dynamic perspective that everyone needs to adjust to is the idea that collaboration is the new competition.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. I am very excited today to have a repeat guest, Tammy Alvarez, who is the founder and CEO of Career Winners Circle. I call her the Career Whisperer, and she's also an expert in disruption and business leadership. So I'm really excited, Tammy, to have you back with everything that's going on in the economy and in the world right now, to have a conversation about how people can handle all that's going on around them. So welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast.
Thanks, Art. It is great to be back. And we've got a lot of big things to talk about.
So let's jump
today.
in. What are the big disruptors that you're seeing right now that are creating a lot of unwanted transition? I'm not saying it's not good, that we can't make good out of it or find, as we were just discussing, find some gold in the bag of shit. But what are the big disruptors that you're seeing right now, the big things you're seeing?
Yeah, and I think that's why we're talking today, right? Is we are in a situation where I think for the first time in a long time, we're faced with what I refer to as a poly-crisis environment. It's not just one-dimensional. Every time you turn on the news, read the paper, scroll your social media feed, we are getting bombarded with geopolitical uncertainty, with government changes, with tariff whiplash, with AI and all the disruption that this is not just a normal tech change, right? This is a change in how business gets done. And this continued lack of engagement with teams to really care about and lean into what they're doing. And so with all of these things that are not only on the playing field all at one time, but they are consistently changing in real time, almost daily. So many leaders and executives and people trying to manage their career are being forced to rethink about how.
And I think about another one on Main Street, not just Wall Street, is how many job cuts there have been. Huge amount of job cuts, huge amount of government funding cuts. Not just government jobs, but we saw, in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago that the, half of the industries, first time since the heart of COVID, where half of the industries have had reduction in jobs in 1 month, right? So there's a very big disruption there as well for many people, and also people that'll be feeling like it's not a transition that they chose. Right. So in the title of this podcast, or the tagline, we talk about making the most out of the changes that life gives us, not necessarily the ones that we chose. Right. So here we are. There's a whole bunch of macro environment changes. And then for a lot of people, there's a very, even bigger change, which is they've all of a sudden been given a pink slip. So that's.
Yeah. And so many people have been impacted by this. And I don't think we're done. I think that trend will persist, whether that's through, the knock-on effects of lower government spending, whether it's the knock-on effects of tariffs, whether it's the knock-on effects of AI. And, we're on video, so I'm not, fooling anyone. When I bring this back to, this reminds me very much of when we were in the late 90s, when there was this combo .com explosion and the fear of Y2K, and that the world was actually going to come to an end. Because trust me, it was real. And so from that perspective, and I was reading an article that talked about, from an AI tech perspective, about almost half of the companies that were started in 23 and 24 are no longer in business. And that is so similar to the dot-com era, where things popped and disappeared overnight. And then it went from the boom to bust. Right.
The trough
and at
of
the
disillusionment,
same time,
right? As we came down into that trough. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Right. And you realize that, wait a minute, you actually need to be profitable to get funding. I mean, the amount of money that went into these organizations with, zero financial fundamentals.
Which is similar to the AI situation now, right?
No different. It is no different. And their failure rate is equally as abysmal, right? In terms of, because it's an emerging industry. And you don't know who's going to win, who's going to solve for it. Today's winner is tomorrow's loser, all these things. And so, but when the world didn't end at Y2K, and when the dot-com bust normalized, there was carnage. People were losing their jobs all over the place. It was absolutely horrible. Yet every time that there is a crisis, when everybody's hiding under their desks, hoping not to be impacted, that's an opportunity to surge. And it's easy to feel fearful. It's easy to feel out of control. It's easy to feel uncertain, because now more than ever, we can't see around the corner to try and anticipate what's happening.
From day to day. I mean, normally you're thinking 6, 18, 24 months out. Today you can't think from a week out.
3 best, right? 3 to 6 maybe, right? Yeah, exactly. And so as a leader, how do you lead a team through this, right? As an executive, how do you lead a company through this? And as a person that's, in the line of fire, literally, getting the work done, it's like, how do you show up? How do you navigate? How do you protect your interests? And how do you make sure that you're okay? And I have found that during times of chaos, there's always opportunity. And that's what I really want us to share with with your listeners today is, how do you think about this?
So let's start with that. I think you said something really important. Like, how do you find the opportunity, right? So what's, if I'm somebody that's, just woken up to a new set of tariffs, or woken up to a 80% cut in government funding for the research arm of my business, or woken up to being laid off, right? Coming back from vacation, like a friend of mine that I was talking with last night, and he's laid off after 40-year career and 20 years with this one company. What's the necessary, what's the tools for creating the mindset to be able to look for the opportunity to get out of your internal crisis, right? Even though there's a lot of external crisis, that's the same for everybody, right? But what is the key to the mindset to be able to start to get yourself in the right place to look for the opportunity in the crisis?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, Art. And I think one of the biggest things we need to embrace is that playbooks that worked 2 years ago, 5 years ago, mindsets that worked then, strategies that worked then are failing now. They're not working. And so we're using the old ideas and the old ways we used to solve things in a new environment and wondering, why are we still spinning our wheels? So there's some fundamental mindset shift changes that need to happen. And it doesn't matter whether you're the CEO or whether, you're 5 years into your career. And one of the biggest changes from a dynamic perspective that everyone needs to adjust to is the idea that collaboration is the new competition. We are so used to operating in a zero-sum game where you have to lose for me to win. And whether that's your frenemy at work that you're, competing for with a promotion, whether that's your peers as a leadership or within other organizations. But here's what's happening. The pace of change that we're experiencing is so significant. The future is so difficult to predict that individuals, leaders, and companies don't have the personal assets, whether it's money, time, or resources, to hedge for every eventuality. And so instead of, and I'll share some examples on how this works in all these scenarios, but instead of feeling like you've got to build everything, I've got to build my personal library of capabilities, I've got to, build all of these things and create these new organizational dynamics. When you find the right partners to collaborate with and jointly solve that problem, now all of a sudden you are so much more powerful. collectively than you are as an individual, whether it's a company or person. And you're able to hedge a lot more easily without
Right. So sort of
making the wrong
natural
bet,
hedge. And
taking the wrong
I
road.
think of an example of that because when I first heard
Absolutely.
you say that, I was sort of like, what does that really mean? You remember the first time we discussed this and like, what is it? But I think about like
Yeah.
several of my coaching clients, they say their most valuable tool right now is a peer advisory group of competitors. Right now, of course, it can't be exactly in the
Yes.
same market because that is hardcore competitors and it's antitrust, but it's still competitors. And usually these are ones that are geographically spread, so they're not in the same market, but they're doing exactly the same business. But they're covering each other's blind spots, learning from each other, and it's really interesting to me. And this is when I think about the range of business sizes, I'm thinking from a few million to a few hundred million are still saying this is one of the most valuable assets I have right now, is to be able to work with people in the same industry that would otherwise be my competitors, to be able to make all of us better. All right. And that's something that you would
Absolutely.
not think about so much before, for sure.
Oh, absolutely no, right? Those were nice to have.
Right.
Those weren't critical to success. But for example, we've got a lot of manufacturing companies that have gone offshore, right? Because it's cheaper, faster, all those things, but a lot haven't. And in these environments, if you're in a manufacturing organization, you've got to bring things back to the States because we don't know where the tariff whiplash is going to ultimately end. And so instead of paying all this money to build these facilities in the States again, right, a lot of leaders are getting creative and finding complementary manufacturing facilities that have, the same types of equipment or can be retrofitted for that. And that way they can share production schedules. Right. That way they can say not all of it is going to be here because we have a non-US market, but now we can bring some things back in without having to have all that capital investment and that long tail time it takes to get that back up and running. From business perspective, from individuals, like if you're sitting there trying to figure out how do you matter more in your job, right? How do you make a bigger impact for your company when it's either struggling or, there's a lot of companies that are still in hyper growth mode and can't keep up with that. And a lot of that is by, using that same idea in terms of what other resources are within the organization that I need, that they need me, and how can we partner together to be able to deliver something more impactful, faster, better, smarter into the organization collectively. And we're just so used to, I think, from a cultural perspective in America specifically, and from a corporate perspective, well, it's very individual.
And even inside of organizations, like you said, if you're withholding information from somebody because you want to be lined up to be the next promotion, that's going to actually backfire today. Whereas that maybe would have worked 10 years ago.
Yes.
20 years ago, right?
Correct. And it did work well, right? You didn't want to give your frenemies your good ideas because they take them. And that's not how that works. And so that's what I mean by the old playbooks don't work. Right. And like even when we look at technology transformation, because we've been in we're always transforming our tech, right? There's never a set stable moment. This is not, AI is not a normal tech
This is at least as big, probably bigger than the .com bubble, right? It's probably the biggest one we've ever been
most
through.
Definitely.
Right. But that's true every time we have something significant new and we still somehow make it. We thought, a lot of people thought the world was ending, as you said, at .com or at .com, like that 2000.
Yeah.
Coming, are we going to be able to survive without the computers? This one's even bigger, but we'll find another way to make that too. But how does that affect your business and how can you use it? And when your plate's already full and now you have 3 other crises besides AI, how do you take the time to think about that? Who are the experts you should be in touch with? How do you find the right ones? Or how does it apply to your business? And that makes me think a little bit about this disrupted Unconference, Tammy, that we're both part of coming up in New York in October. Partly because that's one of my questions, right? Is what does AI mean to me in my business, right? And it's not something I'm an expert in. I'm an engineer, but I'm a mechanical engineer, and that's outside of my bandwidth. So that's one of the things I'm really excited to learn from the AI folks there. But let's talk a little bit about that. Like with all of these major disruptions, major crises going on, what's on dock for us in New York in October?
Yeah, so I am super excited about the Unconference on October 16th in New York City. And this is a continuation of the Disrupted Future of Work event that we did last year. This is called Work Reimagined because I think the future of work is already here, right?
And now it's up to us to catch up with it, to reimagine it and our roles in it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen the video of I think it was in China where it was the football match with all robots, right? And, it's just some of these things I'm like, okay, we're going to have flying cars very soon. I just don't even know. But like I was saying before, I think the biggest challenge we have today is that we know that work doesn't work. And, our businesses are showing it because we don't have the resiliency that we need to be able to adjust and adapt to these poly crisis and poly disruptors that are coming at us every place we go. We're not trained and we're not prepared to be able to have this dynamic fluidity within our businesses, within our leadership models, within how we make decisions.
And with our rapid career changes for people that are, our age or older or even younger, that are just starting in a career and all of a sudden it's gone, right?
100%. That's right. And that's what this event is about. It is to prepare executives, particularly in the middle market sector, to really not just weather the storm, but reinvent how work gets done. Because new playbooks are out there and they're proven and they work with a level of dynamism that's not generally taught or understood in terms of how we've led organizations and how we look forward in terms of what we need to do next. And so we're bringing in, we call it the Unconference because it's nothing like a normal conference or summit or anything like that. It's a lot of things that we're doing, but we're bringing in 9 experts, 3 from the AI space, to really talk about how do you decide what you're going to use, what to hedge with everybody, disappearing and showing up, like what's the right thing for your business.
I'm really excited about learning about that one myself.
I know. Yeah, me too. Right. Exactly. We've got some amazing experts that are coming in, in the AI space. We're looking at future forward leadership. We need to make a move, a significant shift, and this is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, but from leading through hierarchy to leading with vulnerability. And so all the things that we were taught you're not allowed to do, never let them see, fear. It's like, blood in the pool of sharks. Like those are the things that are killing us right now. And so we need to flip the script.
And I'm super excited to be part of that panel because that's the way that I led.
I'm so excited.
Even though I was actively told by my bosses, by my peers, you can't do that. But I did, and it works so well. And that, and back then it was a competitive advantage, and now it's necessary for survival. Right. So I'm really excited to bring my multi-culti and continent perspective on that. I'm really excited to be there.
Absolutely. And it's new.
And it's very scary because we think we're giving the tools to our team and our competitors and our colleagues to kill us. Right. But actually, we're showing how we're going to lead and get the most out of people and bring the engagement back. I mean, you were talking about these 2 studies that show how low engagement is. And today, with all the crisis, it's added distraction. And if people can't be completely focused, if they don't feel like they are seen as people at work, you cannot get the productivity that you need to survive today.
That's exactly right. And that's why we have that 3rd track, which is talent and culture. And it's interesting because in, countless conversations with middle market CEOs and looking at the research, that gets published every year for the past 5 years, regardless of what's going on in terms of business headwinds and opportunities. So whether it's geopolitical instability, currency fluctuation, all kinds of things in terms of government changes. One of the top 3 things that executives are concerned about is what they call the talent shortage crisis. They don't feel they have the right people, enough people. And Gallup proves that this is true in, they did those 2 surveys, right? And one of those surveys asked people, how satisfied are you with your job? And 80% said they were satisfied.
Right.
Which I was like, that's kind of higher than I thought it would be. Then they asked a different question. It's like, how much do you actually care about what you do? That number went down to 20%. I'm like, that's the number I was expecting to hear. And so we have 60% of our people that are walking around in this apathetic haze, that are mailing it in from top to bottom. It's not, a specific part of the organization. This is human beings in general, where things are just good enough, or things around me are so terrifying because they're changing. I'm just going to hunker in and hope for the best. But this complacency kills careers and it kills companies. And there's a better way. We've got 30 years of data that prove, be it in my mind, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that focusing on employee engagement does not work. But what does? And that's the issue, is there's no replacement strategy that's out there. So we're going to keep doing our pulse surveys. We're going to keep doing our employee stat surveys. We're going to keep creating these committees that meet and make people feel good for 5 seconds and then angry because nothing got done.
Yeah, programs of the month actually make things worse if there's nothing concrete, right?
Right, yes. And so part of Disrupted, like that pillar, talks about what will work. How do you reactivate your team? How do you tap into their aspirations so they can take the things that they love, the things that they're best at, and apply those skills to your company's hardest problems? And it's not by doing things the way we've always been done. And so that's really what Work Reimagined is about, is bringing together a invited selective executive cohorts and middle market to create new norms, to establish new ways to make work work. And it's different because it's more think tank meets hackathon. So it's, if you want to sit and listen,
it's not to sit and be lectured at, but it's to participate, share ideas, learn from a few experts, learn from each other, from the other 74 executives in the room. Right? This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Midlife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes. You've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do. But you still feel like something's missing. Like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. Midlife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition. And we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community.
Exactly. And if you want 2 hours of shoulder time with Art to have him look into your business and help you from that leadership perspective, create new ways to lead. I'm just beyond excited, because the level of transformation that happens in the time that we're together on the 16th is just the beginning. Because this is, the spark to what we're calling a movement, and to build an ongoing community of peers with the experts. So that way you've got that level of support that you need to navigate all the changes that are still
the ones that we have in front of us and yet to come. So that's one of the tools that is, especially executives, mid-market companies can really tap into, that can solve a lot of their issues and address, a few of the big issues that are on the big disruptors that are on task right now. And I was thinking about, if we think about employees that have also had a huge change, like when I think about this podcast, the most talked about transition, when I ask people about their most significant transition, is a career transition. Right. It's not more than 50%, but it's more than any other categories. So it's a big part of all of our lives, and how to figure out what's next for us is really a challenge. And a lot of these transitions, some were chosen. Some people have the courage to walk up to it and step out, as you did in your story from our first episode that we talked about. And I could say I did because I chose to, but in a way it wasn't, because it was also a health crisis that woke me up to it. Right. And that's the case. I was forced into evaluate, like, is this, can I continue to go the way that I have been? No. Right. And that was a clear answer. So for people that have a career change, thrust upon them in one way or another, or they've just fed up and hate Mondays and, want to learn how to love Mondays again, what are tools we have for them? And I mean, I think of one, right, which is this 8 steps to mastering life transition. And that goes through a lot of the things, right, that we all have macro things going on around us, right? And it's easy to focus on that and focus on the problems instead of saying, well, this is what is, right? So that's step 1 of it, is accept what is, right? And then from there, what do you need to let go of? What are old patterns or things in yourself that you need to let go of to make space for the new? And then really important one for me, and I think for a lot of people, especially if you've been laid off, it's easy to, or your business is really suffering with tariff, whiplash, or whatever else it is, it's really easy to freak out about scarcity. And then for what's been super useful to me and my clients is to meet fear with data. To instead of freak out about it, and I call it frothing at the brain, get out the Excel sheets, get out your P&Ls, get out your savings plan, meet with your financial advisor and see where you're actually at and see how much. I was with a man yesterday working with him on that and how many more options that he has than he thinks that he has.
Yeah, I call it looking under your bed to see if it's really monsters or dust
or maybe a jewel.
So, yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Meeting fear with data is super important. And then be curious. And this is one where I wanted to pause for a minute, Tammy, because I feel like you really have great expertise here. Like to be curious, what is it that you really want? And how could, if you could have it any way that you wanted, one of my friends that got laid off that I was talking with, he said, I'm not sure, while I hate being laid off and it's been a kick in the gut, I'm not sure I want to go back to the job I had before, 60 years old, right? So people being curious, it's a step forward, but how do we find what we want? How to nurture that curiosity, how to find what really inflames you and passions you, where you can really, and can you make money at that? So I'd like to hear your expertise on that one a little bit as well.
Yeah. And I think this starts with my personal journey in terms of how that gets informed.
Go back to the previous episode with Tammy Alvarez to hear the whole thing.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Give us a very brief synopsis of that. Give us a 30-second version.
Yeah, I mean, the 30-second version, is I spent, 20 years in and around Wall Street. The last, maybe 25, trying to date myself here. But, the last 15 as a C-suite executive for Fortune 100 companies. And, I was managing 2,000 people, 35 countries, solving some of the biggest problems in financial services. And I loved it.
Right.
Until I didn't. And I was in that boardroom just talking about the same nonsense we talk about every quarter with earnings and missing and whose fault is what. And I just remember, and I joke around saying that my career developed a disease that I didn't know was terminal. And it's called I don't give a shititis. And I just couldn't get myself to care about anything.
But you became part of this 60% that we were just talking about. At that moment, you became part of this 60%.
Yeah. And I've never been there before. You know what I mean? And so that's when I decided to cash out and move to a tropical island off the coast of Belize and start this company about 8 years ago. But the thing that struck me, and this is where the information on how to be curious comes in, is that more people than not asked me, why are you giving up?
Why are you giving up? And you didn't feel like you were giving up.
Now, in my mind, I was making one of the most terrifying, bold decisions I've ever made in my whole life. Right? Going to zero paycheck, moving to a foreign country with a person that I had never lived with before, but we've been dating for years. I'm like, what could possibly go wrong? All the things. But so my point is about curiosity. It's the very first question you need to ask yourself, especially if you are either by choice or by force at that decision point, at that inflection point, is why? Why do I want what I've been wanting? And is that still important? Because you get to decide what good looks like for you. You get to decide what's important. And you get to decide how you get there. And so many of us are on this wheel of doing things because it's expected. Doing things because it's the next step. Doing things because it's easy. And to give yourself the grace to just put everything else aside. If no one else got a vote, how would you want to live your whole life? Because I spent my entire adult life building my life around my career. And this time, I built my career around my life.
Yep.
We travel all over the world.
Yep.
I'm talking to you from Belize right now. I live in Mexico City. We travel extensively because that ability to serve and make an impact in my mind can happen anywhere in the world and from anywhere in the world. But I had to reset what was important. You know what? My $5,000 a month apartment in Manhattan wasn't important. My designer shoes, my designer handbags, the big fancy job, the big paycheck, the status that comes with, title, like those things were I decided that those things were no longer important to me. But
I think that's really important. I remember I woke up in my throes of trying to decide whether to walk out of my career or not, 3:00 in the morning one time with this quote that popped into my head. Life is not a monument to be built, but an adventure to be experienced. Because the first half of my life, I was building a monument, mostly to myself, right? Of myself, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But there comes a point where you all of a sudden realize, like, I'm going to stop listening to everything else and I want to seek the advice. That's the next step, step 5, seek advice. But what's the first advice? Your own internal guidance. What's important to you in the second half? I love what you said. What energizes you? Like when we talk, right? What energizes you? Yeah. What would you do even if nobody was paying you for it? And maybe you're not to that point. Maybe you are, where you don't have to get paid for what you do. But if either way, it's really useful to see. I remember Kevin Kelly talking about, he's the founder of Wired and just very interesting thinker and technologist. And he talked about a very useful question like that he asked his kids as they were adulting is, if you had $1 billion, what would you do? Because billion is like the new million. You have to have $1 billion to like not think about money, which is ridiculous. I think probably 10 million is enough. But he asked him that question. And the reason he did, he said, because what they come back with is normally something that doesn't take a lot of money, but they just don't have the freedom to think about it unless you take money off the table. Like one of them was like, well, I'd love to start like an orphanage. Yeah. Well, guess what? You don't really need any money. You can raise a little bit locally. And then, so it's just to open our mind up, but to seek advice, it's really important. But the first one is our own, right? What is it that lights us up? What is it that we'd really like to do if we didn't have the traditional limitations on us? And then from there, that's the only way that you can really contribute to the whole thing we're talking about with, with so many things going on. If you're not in that sweet spot, you're not going to have the energy and the passion to do what's necessary to be successful today in business. So it's the opposite of what I thought the whole time is that you suffer through it. If you're not doing what really lights you up, you're not going to make it. It's actually the first step. I mean, you and I were just talking about this, right? So it's the first step to doing what it is. Yeah. So no, that's really great. And I really appreciate that reflection on being curious. Like, I think that's so important. The next step is plan, right? And I love that quote from Eisenhower, which is planning is everything, but plans are nothing. So doing a good plan is what makes you allowed to pivot once no plan survives contact with the enemy. Another quote from some military leader, right? That's right. But you got to have the plan because then you know how to pivot, right? Then you understand the terrain you're in. And even right now, like we know none of us are going to have a plan with all the crazy things, all these massive crises going on at the same time. But if you've done a good plan, then you can understand as things move around you, how to move much better if you've done a good plan. And then one where I think a lot of us really, this is true for everybody and across the board in every situation, focus on what you can control. All right. It'd be easy to sit there and watch Fox News and CNN the whole time and freak out, right? But there's nothing we're going to control. We're not going to control whether there's tariffs or not, or how much there is, right? We're not going to control funding that comes from the government or not. And we're not going to control the rate at which AI rolls out. What can we control? How does that apply to my business? What are the things I can do in my sphere of control, sphere of influence that make a difference? So also really important. And then the last one, which we often forget, is do something, right? Once you've done those things, take some action. Right? What's the MVP, right? Or MVA? What's the minimally viable action that you can try to see if you like this, if this idea has value, if you could work in this new industry, like you said, if you could transfer stuff over. So speak a little bit, Tammy, because I know this is really an expert in this. I like to call you the career whisperer. So to speak to people in different stages of their careers, toward the end or toward the beginning, how can they think about transferring? So they've had this hit, they're out of a job now, or they've woken up and said, I don't like this anymore, like you did, until I realize I don't like it.
Right. Or they're the only one who didn't get laid off.
That was the first time I changed professional jobs after graduating from college. Was that situation. They're laying off everybody. They're not even laying off. They have an attrition program. And guess what happens with attrition programs? All the good people leave because they're the ones that can get jobs. And then the ones that are left, the good ones that are left are carrying, 2 or 3 jobs. So that was the first time I left the company after college, was that situation. Exactly. So talk to them though about what do you see when you say do something? What do you see the possibilities? How can people do something, focusing on what they can control and change their thinking about maybe what's possible for them? This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing, challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. You can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets.
Yeah, and so there's 3 easy steps that people can take right now. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is like, what do I need to do first, second, third to navigate this and not just survive? Because again, back to that scarcity mindset, but I've always found that during times of crisis, that is the best opportunity to surge.
Tell me more about that, because that doesn't make sense to me intuitively. So,
right. Like when all hell is breaking loose everywhere else, like when things are going bad, there are other areas where things are going incredibly well. But you don't get to hear about that because that's not newsworthy. That's not creating that fear and panic that,
it sells commercials,
that we're used to seeing every time we come out of our own little bubble, right? But here's the reality. Nothing is ever all bad or all good. And when industries are dipping, there are other industries that are growing like gangbusters. When sectors are dying, there's other sectors that are winning. And so there's the 3 things that I want people to do right now. Getting back to the one thing I talk about is figure out what energizes you. What are the things that you can do for 12 hours a day, and end of the day more energized than when you started it? And we all have those 1 or 2 things that just,
and it may be a tired still at the end of a 12-hour day, but it's a happy tired. You have.
Well, that's it. It's not like I can go to bed and cry for an hour, right? Yes, exactly. It's not like that. It's like, this was good. I'm tired, right? But it's a good time. So that's step 1, is get clear on that, because most people can't do that. Most people do not know what life is.
So how would you
spend some time figuring that out?
What specific advice, if you broke that down into a step inside of how do I find what I like? What's the first step that you would recommend for that?
Yeah, so we do something in some of our coaching sessions called your brag sheet. And so the quick and easy bit of this is to really pick 5 of the most epic moments in your career and write them down and why they make you proud. Because most of the time, these aren't swoon-worthy moments on your resume. These are things that make you personally proud of what you've done, and they don't have the big price tag or anything like that to go with it. And then once you do that, then when you sit back and look at those 5 moments, you are going to find themes that really thread through all of your brag sheet moments. Those are the things and the environments that light you up. So that's probably the easiest way to do that. I think the next thing to think about in terms of once you figure that out is be much more intentional about where you are putting and applying your skills and talents, whether it's inside an organization or externally. But what you want to do is you want to find opportunities, and they're always there, where those skills that light you up are in high demand and in short supply. Because when you can say, these are my superpowers, these are the things I love to do, and you can apply them to an environment that really needs what you offer, absolutely magic. Right. And so that step 2 is to pay attention to what's going on. Where are those? Because there's so many industries that are struggling right now. And there are so many industries that are changing right now. And so the skill base, the people, the mindset, the experiences that are organic within a company or organic within an industry have gaps. And if you can be that gap filler, it doesn't matter where you came from or what you can do, there's opportunity. So, figure out what lights you up, find out where that's in high demand and in short supply. And then here's where we're going to split a little bit on that step 3. If you've got 15 plus years in your career, this may be time for you to make that mindset shift to being paid for what you do, to being paid for what you know. Now, that is a game changer, both from the work that you do, the resilience that you have in your career, the money that you make, and the impact you're able to deliver.
So all of those things can multiply without multiplying the hours.
Oh my goodness. Significantly, right? And so that's step 1 or part of it.
If
once
somebody's
you're ready to put that in action,
15 to 30 years, 40 years into their career, and especially on the backside of that, people feel often very concerned about being able to get another job. But what you're saying is that if you really shift your own mindset from what you do to what you know and leverage that, you can actually come out even ahead from where you were before.
Yes, because the first thing most people think about, no matter how senior you are, especially when you are no longer employed, through unexpected outcomes, you go immediately into scarcity mode. What's the least I'm willing to work for? And I'm going to play small. I'm going to, and that is the worst thing you can do because no one will hire you no one's going to overfill a role. They don't see that as a value. They see that as a stopgap until you find something else. So play bigger. Like you've earned this seat. The battle scars that you have over the past, 15 to 20 years, people will pay very good money to avoid that pain. And companies will pay very good money to avoid that pain. And so be that solution. And, we can have 6 more episodes on how to do that, right? But generally speaking, if you're more senior, let's talk about those that are less than 15 years because you're kind of feeling like you're a bit, fungible at this point. And what I would strongly recommend is really being able to leverage AI in terms of your own personal capabilities so you can focus more of your time on critical thinking, on solving problems, on figuring out what matters most. So what you want to do is you want to be able to focus on the company's biggest objectives. So think about what is their priority. Is it customer acquisition through new customers? Is it organic growth? Is it cost savings? Is it risk avoidance or mitigation? Like what are the things, what is the tone from the top within your organization? Or when you're, if you're unemployed, take those superpowers and find out where those are most needed. But make sure that you are always directly connecting to the company's biggest priorities. Because when you're working on the things that are most important, you become much more resilient to these unexpected twists.
And I'll say if you're customer facing, focus on your customer's biggest problems as well. They will reward you in spades.
100%. Right? Well, they are your customers. Yeah.
No, that's
So when you and I think when we treat our career like a business, when we become the CEO of our careers, whether we're the CEO of a business, or 5 years in and everything in between, you take all those skills that you use to run business and you apply it to yourself. And you want to make sure that you've got a good sales and marketing team, which is your network and your power base. You want to make sure that you've got really good products and services. And so all of these things I think are really important.
That's great. And those are great tools that anybody can do right now in any situation that they're in. That really makes it useful.
That's right.
Tammy, I really appreciate this conversation, and I think it's really timely as well, right? That there's so much going on right now that we give.
Well, there's just so much change, and it's so scary out there. So I'm hoping 2 things, right? That our listeners feel hope and optimism in being able to take more control than they feel like they have, and that they take some of the steps that you and I both talked about for them. And the other thing is, if you are a middle market executive,
Right.
then get to Disrupted, because this is going to be a game changer for you, for your
Yeah.
leadership team, and for your business. But it's just so timely, Art, with all of the uncertainty that's going on. So I'm hoping that, some of the things that we talked about really resonate.
And
with a lot of our
I
listeners
love
today.
the part that you talked about too, about everybody, about really focusing on what lights you up. Right. So even if you've just lost your job and you think, oh, I can't afford to take my wife out on a date, or, take my husband out on a date. Yeah. Keep doing those things that light you up, and
Exactly.
keep connecting with your kids and with your friends. And from that, to start to see how can you leverage your experience, whether it's, on the early side of your career or on the later side of your career. So if people want to reach out to me, you guys know where it is. You can reach out on the podcast. You can reach out on artblanchford.com or lifeandtransition.net. Get these 8 steps. They're free and available on the website to help everybody through these transitions. And then, Tammy, where can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about the Disrupted Unconference?
Sure, absolutely. So if you're interested in the Disrupted Conference, you can go to unconferencenyc.com. And for our career advisory services and our strategy and all the other things that we do, you can go to careerwinnerscircle.com.
Thank you, Tammy, very much. Really.
Round 2 is
it's
just
always
as much
fun
fun
to connect
so
and to think a little bit more broadly
Yeah.
about the macro situation as well that's going on right now. So first podcast newscast
absolutely.
in together
All
here.
right.
So very good. Thanks so much, Tammy.
That's right. Always a pleasure.
Yep. Take care.
Bet. I'll see you in October.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeandtransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.